Welcome to our second session. This is Digital Twins Enhancing the Future of Project Stakeholder Collaboration. Johnny Clemmons is going to be joining us. He's the Global Vice President of Engineering, Construction, and Operations Industry Business Unit, SAP. He's joining us from Florida. Johnny works all over the world. He works with the world's largest general contractors, the most sophisticated contractors in the world that have the discipline to implement structured processes and implement ERP systems to enhance their business. Johnny's been in the industry for more construction focus for probably 15 years now. He's worked, sounds like every position from the ground up, working as a field engineer, project manager, became area manager, district manager. Spent a lot of his career with Kiewit, which is a major general contractor. Operates all over the world, maybe one of the largest general contractors. And then he transitioned in his career and focused on ERP implementation for major companies, which brought him to SAP. And interestingly, he also spent some of his career in the military working in using counterintelligence and using technology to help the U.S. military with their campaigns, et cetera. So pretty interesting career overall. Extremely excited to have you join us. And Johnny's doing two presentations today. So today, this morning's session is more of a technical focus. It's a little bit longer. And then the afternoon is going to be more strategic. I don't know if that does a good job of introducing you, John. You can build on that if you want to, but I'm going to turn it over. And thank you very much for doing this. And we're excited to see what you have to say.
All right, thanks, Tom. Just a couple of things. So, I spent over 15 years actually working in the industry, and another 10 years now at SAP. So about nearly 25 years, construction focused at this point. And the Kiewit time was actually one of the shorter times in my career. So it wasn't the majority of my career was at other engineering construction companies. So just to make sure everybody's aligned around that and not misunderstanding.
Spreading misinformation.
Yeah. So my team at SAP, I'll just give everybody a bit of an understanding of what my team does. So I have a team that really looks at the construction industry end to end to understand what's happening in the industry, where's the industry going, and what does the industry need to be able to to do the things that it needs to do in the future. So we typically do that in conjunction with a group of customers that we call our Industry Advisory Council. So this is some logos of some people who've participated in that council with us over the years. But we've really been doing this for over 20 years now at SAP. We've had a dedicated engineering and construction business unit at SAP, over 3,000 customers, and we work with that advisory council to see what's going on in the industry and what are customers going to need within the next 1 to 3 years to really be able to advance their companies and get and deliver better for their customers. So I just wanted to give a bit of that background because I know that the first thing people think of when they hear, when they say, hey, let's talk about BIM or digital twin or those things, they don't necessarily think of SAP first, but and that's that's just the way it is, right? It's not our primary focus, but it's definitely an area that we look at as building information modeling and digital twins as a part of that end-to-end construction process, and certainly has a place to help deliver value for our customers. And so when we start to think about the industry a bit and to talk about what's going on out there in the world, and I'm really not going to spend time talking about COVID-19 today. It does have some impacts on some of the things that we're talking about, but really only in the way that we think it's going to accelerate a lot of the trends that are happening around the technology side. But I'm going to spend most of my time really talking in the broader general context of construction. And when we do that, and we talk about the global population reaching 9 billion by 2050, that creates a significant demographic-based demand for construction, construction work. And then we start continuing to think about people continuing to move to cities, with about 2/3 of the people living in cities by 2050. Most people are aware that means about 200,000 people a day have been moving to cities, over the last few years, and that trend is expected to continue, which creates a huge demand on the construction industry. And then finally, only about 25% of the infrastructure that's needed in 2050 exists today. So that means the long-term demand for the construction industry to deliver in order to meet the needs of the global population to give people places to live, work, and play is there, right? It's going to be there, and we need to, as an industry, deliver on those requirements so that people have those places to live. Because if we fail, the impact in human terms will be tremendous, and with people not having safe places to live. So when the discussions that we have with our construction industry customers, they've really talked about 3 areas that they wanted us to focus over the last couple of years. And the first is this idea of complexity in construction projects. Construction projects continue to get bigger, taller, more technologically advanced. They're getting greener, with more environmental requirements being placed on projects. And what most companies see today is that there's still a lot of siloed information within their businesses, between the different companies working on the projects, and that they really said, hey, we have a vision of a more BIM-based collaboration around projects, and we'd like for SAP to help us with that, because we think that's really the only way to address the complexity of these projects and still be able to deliver them with the quality that they need to be delivered with. The second thing they talk to us about is workforce experience. I think everyone's aware of the retirement in the construction industry of the older generation of skilled trades that are retiring, and we have a much younger workforce coming in. And then today, many of the processes are driven manually. The people just know what to do next in the process. And what our customers are saying is, hey, we want to see more automation in there. We want systems to drive processes so that people can focus on what it is that they do on a day-to-day basis and not have to worry about necessarily what the next step is or who's the next person who's going to deal with this. They want that automation to help drive those processes and simplify it for the workers so that we can deliver the same things. And then obviously we have a productivity issue in the industries, and a lot of that is driven around delivery of materials and getting the right people, the right equipment, the right all together at the same place at the right time on a project in the proper sequence to make things happen. And having more visibility into the supply chain and having a more connected supply chain so that people can dynamically adjust based on variations in the supply chain are the types of things that our customers are telling us that they want us to help address for them. And when we take a look at that, and they sort of translated that into a group of strategic priorities that are really around expertise and knowledge. How do we capture all the expertise and knowledge within our organizations and deliver that information to the right people at the right time in the right format so that they can consume it? How are we going to connect the construction site together so that we're able to see IoT information and those sorts of things? They want to improve intercompany collaboration. They want to sort of solve this commissioning and operations issue that's loomed out there for many years of how do we hand over projects in a more seamless way so that people can execute the operational phase of the building in a better way. And then they want to digitize their supply chain so that they have better understanding of what's going on out there. So when we start to think about, okay, what's that have to do with BIM and what does that have to do with digital twins and the stakeholders, and how does SAP look at that? So when I do that, I have to really look at this chart and talk a bit about sort of the history and the direction that we've taken at the direction of our customers. So for years down in the lower left-hand quadrant of this, it was really, and mostly BIM was one piece of software within one company used for a number of different purposes to do building information models, and people have used it for marketing purposes. They've used it for clash detection and other buildability related issues. And then there's also, if you shift over to the right toward what's labeled as big BIM there, that's really multiple companies but still centered around a single piece of software that and obviously there are issues when you're trying to do that on construction projects of having all the right people using the same piece of software, because different companies have different standards of the software that they use. So when you try to get people to work on the same piece of software, obviously, you can run into issues with that. And if you go, up to the upper left-hand quadrant, there's this idea of open BIM, right? It's multiple BIM software tools, but with the ability within a single company to consolidate those various models into a harmonized model that allows you to connect that to business processes. And so that's where SAP was for years, right? We focus with our customers around how do we optimize the use of the building information model to provide the information that people need in the format that they need it and connect it to that underlying data. And so, just one other sort of clarification around what SAP does from a BIM and digital twin perspective. We don't author those things, right? We don't have an authoring tool from a software perspective that creates building information models or digital twins. What we do is we exploit those, and we take the building information model and connect it to business processes, because at our core, we're a business process automation company. And so the way that if we can take the building information model, and by connecting it with the various other information within an organization, we can turn that into what we think of as a digital twin, that digital representation of a physical object, but that has some dynamic connections to it, right? If it's not really a functional digital twin if it's just a model with no connections to reality or other data sources that allow it to have a dynamic, component to it. So that's sort of the difference, or the way that we think about digital twins. And then when we look at our direction, or what we're doing, what we've done today, and what we're doing in the future, is we're looking at going across multiple companies with multiple pieces of software, and creating that digital twin that then can be connected into the business processes, and then can be shared across multiple organizations in order to drive productivity on construction projects. And and that's really the topic of today is what what our customers have asked of us, and what we're doing to try to deliver on that for them. So we'll get a bit of a dive into the life cycle of what we look at within the construction industry. So we really think about this in a very holistic way, in an end-to-end facility life cycle. I know a lot of people think about just the construction process or pieces of the construction process, but we have customers across a number of different industries, and so what we need to do is look at that entire, what we call enterprise asset management process model. And there, ISO has a process model that they have around that addresses the processes within that within the enterprise asset management. And if you look at the second item down there, the asset information governance, they look at this and say that they think that begins during the procure and build phase. We have a bit of a different view, where we think that really needs to start back in the plan and design phase of starting to manage that information. And we do that with a couple of solutions that we've developed. One, our project information management area, where we're and then the other is the asset and facility information management. And what we do is then connect those two so that we have this end-to-end process support, both from the pre-construction and design through the construction into the operations, maintenance, and even to the decommissioning phase of projects or facility lifecycle as it goes through. And our focus is really around doing this in terms of international standards, because we really believe that the international standards are the only way that we're ever going to get to a truly connected end-to-end process. So we're building in support for these various international standards. And the thing that you'll notice about the standards that I'm showing here is that they both represent this as a cycle. Right? If you see, there's a circle on the left-hand side, and then there's a blue outline on the right-hand side, where that is both showing these things as a cycle. So construction projects, whether they're ground up, new build construction projects, you're going to have some information about that existing site when you start that. And certainly if it's a renovation of an existing site, you're going to have information about that site, and you want to incorporate that into your building process and into your design process. And ultimately, what we really believe is that people need to look at construction projects with the end in mind. what data is the operator of this facility going to need in order to efficiently operate that facility, and build those requirements into the design process so that we ensure that we collect that information during the design phase and during the construction phase of these projects. So if we look a little deeper at one of those, this is the ISO 19650 standard, and you can see this idea of building up of information throughout the process. And we really think that this is a critical component of this, because what we've typically seen, or what happens in the world today, is there's a lot of information built up during the design phase of a project, and then we will often print that to PDFs and hand it off to the project, and then we build some new models around that, and we collect a lot of other information during the construction project. And then when it comes time to hand it off to the customer, we often go back to PDFs or paper files, even in some cases, to hand off that information. And then the owner of the facility has to go about uploading and entering a bunch of that data again. Obviously everybody understands that that's not the ideal situation. We'd really like to be able to build on that data throughout the process. There are some various constraints around that, from contracting language and stuff that people still need to work through and overcome. But ultimately, this is the way that we're going to be able to improve the process from end to end, is by being able to pass that information efficiently from stage to stage within the construction and process. So when you think about that from an SAP perspective, and what we're doing, just to quickly to give you an idea of what's out there, when we look at this from a project intelligence perspective, so at the left-hand side of the screen, we have this thing there called the Project Intelligence Network. That's our collaboration platform that we provide for customers to use around projects. And what it does is it gives you a spatial view of the project. Obviously, the 3-dimension, the 3D BIM view of that, give you a system view of that based on the metadata within the models, and then give you a component view within that, so that you have these multiple ways of looking at that information, but also with direct connections into underlying financial management systems, and then the ability to hand off seamlessly from there into our real estate management solutions, which also have a hierarchy of site, building, floor, space, so that you understand what you're doing from a space management perspective. Hand that information off, and into our asset core and our underlying maintenance platforms, so that we're able to take that same model and view it through a different lens and connect different data to that model depending on what we're doing. So we really think of this as sort of a network of digital twins. So there's a digital twin during the project, during the project phase, that it's all based on the same model, and obviously that model evolves over time, because you never get a fully complete model. Even if you got a fully complete design model, you would add information to that, and ultimately you end up with an as-built and then to an as-operated. But you look at different information during those different phases. So the operator often doesn't care about the rebar inside a wall. What he does care about is whether the pump that's pumping the water through his cooling system is working properly. So there's different things that people care about in those different phases of the project, and so they look at the information slightly differently as they go through there. So when we start to look at the processes within the process, Project Intelligence Network, really think of it as that digital twin sitting at the core. That's the combination of the building information model and all the associated data sets that are connected to that building information model throughout the life cycle of the project, and throughout and connected to the different users, whether those are people at the owner, people at the general contractor, people at the subcontractors, or people at the suppliers, that they're all connecting and collaborating around that central digital twin for the project, and then in the various phases of the project. And so when we start to look in at a deeper level of those processes that people need to look at there, we're really talking about that cross-company project master plan, right? So you want to have everybody be able to contribute to the schedule and understand the impacts of the schedule from the different people across the various companies. You want to be able to manage tasks across companies, whether that's 3D, 4D, 5D, whatever those things are. You want to be able to do that. You want to be able to understand the document delivery schedule in the design phase, and even during the construction phase, submittal phase. You want to understand the delivery schedule you have for documents. You want to be able to consolidate models from the different sources. Remember, we talked about this being an idea of multiple different design tools feeding into a central solution that allows you to harmonize those models and deliver that information, through over time in the various versions, but keeping it harmonized, keeping track of inspections and punch lists, and visual budget control and coordination, commissioning and handover, and then validation and acceptance becomes is a big part of this. And the way that we do that is we have a set of accounts with the people on the that are sort of managing the project, and we have people who are contributing to the project, and those people are all able to connect to that same set of data and systems. So when you look at the different personas that we're talking about there from the project owners, you're going to have their facilities people, you're going to have any project managers they might have overseeing a specific project. When you're looking at the service partners, the construction companies, they're project managers and their engineers, and are also going to be looking this, but all the way down to the foreman on the job site that wants to be looking at this data and seeing the data that they need in the way that they need to see it, in real time or in near real time, so that they're able to do the things that they need to do on the project site. So when we dig a little deeper into some of those processes that we're talking about out there, remember we talked about this idea of a common data environment and around the international standards. So this is the one that we looked at a little bit earlier. But what we think about that in terms of, as I said, we have the seamless handover from the project to the asset management portion of it, so that we look at our intelligence, our project intelligence network, to bring the project part and our asset intelligence or asset central to deliver that information, and then to carry that across there with the document delivery to schedule, the verification and acceptance, the model consolidations, the inspection and punch list management, and the commissioning and handover. And so as I mentioned earlier, we talked about this idea of model verification and acceptance. So as we think about building in the requirements to operate the facility at the end, then we want to be able to monitor and measure whether the data that's being provided is the data that you needed. So you define the requirements, what you're going to need to operate, and then you have the model automatically interrogated as they're submitted in order to understand whether the data that you had asked for is actually being delivered. And I'll talk about that a bit more. But so you have this whole idea of the document model delivery schedule. So you have, you can communicate across the entire project team, across multiple companies, the requirements for what's out there. You create that document delivery schedule and you monitor that, and you have the quality checks along the way and monitor the delivery of those components. The detailed process model available for that, so that as we look at the different players in the thing, so you have the sort of the client at the top, the project owner, and then you have some of the partners in the middle, so that you're able to understand the way that the data flows and what we're doing. So all the blue boxes represent things that we would actually do within the Project Intelligence Network to pull all these things together, and then the boxes of other colors represent things that are done, in different places, whether that's out in a document management system or in an actual design tool. Because as I said, we don't do the design portion. We don't have a CAD tool. What we have is the ability to connect those CAD tools to business processes and drive business processes within organizations. So that idea of a document delivery schedule and the monitoring and the maintenance of that along the way. And then you have the cross-discipline design and process model consolidation. So you can see that a document comes in, or a model comes in, the model is pulled into the system. It's then fed out where you can then have the various other designers do their part. You have the ability to mark up and manage, so that you're bringing all these things together, and ultimately it ends up in that digital twin that's connected to other data sets that allow you to monitor and manage what's going on your projects. So really all about reducing that risk and allowing people to get things together. The information demand modeling, verification, and acceptance is sort of an important part of this, right? As we talked about earlier, the idea of defining the requirements for data, and then once you've defined those requirements, it doesn't do you any good unless you're able to monitor and manage that. So by defining the data elements that are required to be delivered from your design partners and being able to monitor that in real time, and have when they submit a model for the project, for the system to automatically be able to verify that all the data that was supposed to be in that model based on the agreements for that project is there, they can do that, and it can even send it back and say, hey, you're missing these elements. Please update those and bring in and resubmit. And then ultimately you can accept that, or and then once you've accepted it, then you can consolidate it with the other models that have been submitted by other design partners and pull it all together into your normal workflows that you would have on your project. And this is sort of the detailed model verification and acceptance. You'll get these slides so you can look at those things in detail, or you can ask questions about those when we get to the end. I don't intend to cover all of these process diagrams in detail, but I did want you to have visibility to those, and those are the things that we're doing. So in addition, and when we get to the commissioning and handover phase, then we start to think about how do we pass this information off to the next phase of this facility's life cycle. So we want to be able to define all that documentation, collect that required documentation from all the project partners using either integrations to their existing systems so that they can use the systems that they're comfortable using, or they can use the web interface that we provide with this system that allows them to do all of this work directly if they want to. So you define the requirements, you control those processes and document that, and you do it in a collaborative way with everyone having visibility to that same information within the process. Again, the detailed process model, as I said, I don't really intend to cover the detailed processes except in question and answer if people have Q&A around that. Then, so when we start to talk about the exchange between our asset intelligence network and our project intelligence network, and the information that moves back and forth between those, so you can really think about in your asset, and you know who you deal with, what. If you have an existing asset, the vendors that you're working with, so you can use that to generate your preferred vendor list for materials. Specifically, if you're going to be doing like a shutdown and turnaround of a large facility, whether that's an oil and gas refinery or something, or whether it's just a regular building that you're doing some renovations on, you can send that information over to the Project Intelligence Network. You can also bring in the existing model files that may exist within that facility, put that into the Project Intelligence Network, and then from there, you can then create the new control structures or the new asset management structures that you're going to need for the long-term maintenance of this directly from the Project Intelligence Network as you're completing the project. So as you've done your as-builts, you can feed those back into your asset intelligence network and in our asset central tools and have it automatically create the maintenance structures that you need. And then we can also exchange information with other tools like our Cloud for Real Estate solution that allows us to manage that real estate down to the individual desk and who occupies desks within facilities. So really connecting sort of on an end-to-end basis that whole process and allowing people to be much more efficient and effective at doing their individual task. And it's like I said, letting the systems drive some of these processes as you go through that. That really brings us back to this whole idea of a network of digital twins. Hopefully this diagram makes a little more sense to you now than it did the first time I showed it, with this connection between the project and the operating facility, and then all of the supporting processes that go with that, from enterprise asset management to real estate management, and obviously the construction management portion that we all care the most about around how we do these things together. And then, so people sometimes ask me, well, how can you possibly do these things? And the reason that we can do these things for our customers is because all of these solutions are built on top of the SAP Cloud Platform that allows you to use common services and common data structures and between these various solutions, and it also allows us to connect to external solutions because it has a very robust integration capabilities to connect with with all the various solutions that are on the market. So that's the idea of what we're doing. I'm finishing a little bit early, but it leaves plenty of time for questions so that we can go through that. And maybe because I didn't cover some of those process steps in detail, that'll give a little more time for questions if people have them. Mostly when we talk about technical things from an SAP perspective, we're often talking about it from a business process perspective because, as I said, at our core, we're a business process automation company. Obviously, there's a lot of technology that sits underneath those business processes, and I'm prepared to talk about some of that technology in the question and answer space if you guys want, as well as talking about the solutions itself. And so there's my contact information. If you have specific questions that you don't want to ask now, you're more than welcome to do that later. So from that, let's move on to the question and answer phase.
Yeah, so I forgot to remind people to utilize the chat window there for Q&A. So if you do have questions, you want things clarified, please feel free to populate some questions in there. And then if the audience wants those questions voted up, just simply vote on them, and then that'll be at the top there so I answer them. I've obviously got a bunch of questions. One of the challenges is obviously got to be change management. I mean, I would assume that for digital twins that are implementing this kind of solution, you're going to be targeting customers that are already reasonably mature with SAP systems or have them installed, or are you pursuing customers that don't have these systems in place and you have to ramp them up with SAP and then this layer of utilizing the platform for digital twins, and maybe kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, some of our primary customers will be existing SAP customers where we're talking to them about improving the way they manage projects, because we have many of the largest companies in the world that are construction owners are SAP customers, and so there's certainly a value proposition here for the construction owner around this. But we understand that it's never going to be everybody on a project is running SAP in the background, or even a majority of the people on a project running SAP in the background. So what we've built is completely ERP agnostic, right? It doesn't rely on SAP in the background. Now, obviously, there's some out-of-the-box integrations to SAP that make it a quick start with SAP, where you might have to do a couple of integrations if you're running some other ERP, but you can run it even without the ERP if you're mostly looking to do the project collaboration and around the BIM model or the digital twin. So it is fully cloud-based sort of solution, but it does require a different way of thinking about projects, right? Because we're very much accustomed to, as construction people, living in our box within the project and trying to optimize what we're trying to do within the project, and the coordination and communication with the other parts of construction projects are often a secondary consideration to the primary objective of scheduling our own crews and those sorts of things. So it does require a bit of a change in mindset to really looking at how we're going to optimize this project and the collaboration around this project. And I think in some ways it does dovetail in with things like some of the new contracting methods that are out there that people are using now that encourage more collaboration, like IPD and whatnot.
Right. So for this to be successful, and your flowcharts reiterated this as well, but it really takes a lot of planning. Like, you need to start at the early stages of a project and think through, what assets are you going to want to maintain? What data do you need to collect? What geometry from the model do you need to generate? So when you work with clients, are you working with them directly on projects to guide them through that process, or do you enable teams within companies to have that expertise to be able to implement those processes?
We typically enable the teams within the companies to implement those processes, right? So we're providing the technology. We also have some partners that will work directly with companies, to do some of those things as well. But it's the solution supports most of the basic the standard processes that you would need, so it's not a huge implementation issue, right? Again, it's cloud software. So
there's like a workflow, and you follow the workflow to collect the data, or there's guidance at the early stages on what the key points for planning need to be. Because I would imagine you need to coordinate quite a bit with the design consultants to produce the content that you need to pull into the system, and that discussion need to happen early on.
Yeah, when you want to do the full end-to-end, right, then it definitely requires some maturity on the owner's side, right? So I'm working with a with a large government entity in Australia that manages their road and train systems for one of the territories of Australia. And they're really spending a lot of time working with us around understanding what they want what they call their common data environment to look like. And that this is one of the ways that they're looking at utilizing the system as a common data environment for their projects that then feeds into their their long-term asset management pieces. So as a mature asset management client, they have a lot of that information, a lot of those processes. They know what they need. What they've never done before is fed that into the design in a systematic way, so that they actually get delivered what they need at the end. And the struggle that they have based on that is they often spend a lot of time trying to get the data massaged and turned into what they need it to be to do their asset management.
So it's really working backwards from the client's requirements and then pulling that forward in the process so that everyone participating can produce the information the client needs at the end of the job.
Right, and that's the bigger vision, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't get advantages of doing just the project collaboration without having that full life cycle vision, right? We want to provide that capability for people who want to go there, but not everybody will, and not everybody needs to.
Right.
Yep.
So there's a question here from the audience from Megan B. She would like to hear more about the connection between cloud and S4HANA. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe you do.
I know what that is.
How does the security aspect of the cloud come into play for those owners in S4 who manage sensitive portfolios?
Yeah. So obviously, if you're managing a super sensitive portfolio that requires government protection, then obviously you need to run this in one of the secure government clouds, which it can be done. We haven't done it yet. I mean, the German Army is one of our early adopter clients, and they're managing their construction projects for the German Army without having this in a private inside a private cloud that becomes a super secure environment. So it depends on the level of security. We have our NS2, which is a subsidiary or a company, a sister company of SAP that provides secure government stuff for the US, and we have that in other countries as well. So can you do that? Yes. Otherwise, if the information doesn't require that level of security, then you'd be relying on the standard cloud security that most people have.
Okay. So we have about 5 more minutes, I think. So culture has got to be a primary challenge as you implement a system like this. Working with clients that are going from, say, an unstructured process where they don't have these types of systems in place, and then trying to get that change management throughout their business, getting people on board with working and implementing a system like this, getting it set up correctly. How do you manage that change management within an organization to help make them successful with a system like this?
Yeah, so if there's anytime you adopt a new system, there's always some sort of change, right? And there are some philosophical changes to this. So we have a number of partners that work with customers, strictly around this whole concept of change management and thinking about the world differently and thinking about the way you do business differently, and putting together a whole change management plan to help people get from where they are to where they need to be. But again, with it being a fairly simple to use cloud solution, people can get in and start using it very quickly with little to no training. So it all depends on how how big your vision is, right? If you want to get some immediate return and better collaboration, you can adopt the solution very quickly, get it onto projects. You can it's as simple as it's like purchase online, start up the system and start using it, and then when you're ready to start the integration into a larger process, then you start thinking more about that change management. But when you do look at a very large vision of somebody that wants to work collaboratively with their customers to deliver enhanced value in their construction operations, the companies that have a culture of discipline within those organizations tend to do that much better. So if you're, and I don't mean that hey, you do what I say you do when I say you do it. That's not what I mean by a culture of discipline. What I mean by a culture of discipline is people act with discipline to do the things that should be done as part of their culture of the company. And companies that have that culture of discipline do better in all technology implementations than the companies who don't.
Mm-hmm. And SAP, you mentioned open standards and support ISO, et cetera. So maybe elaborate on that a little bit. Like your model viewer platform, I would assume uses IFC as a standard. So, the workflow, it's whatever software platform you're using, what authoring tool you're utilizing, you export to IFC and you bring that into SAP, and your model lives in IFC. And then the data structure is in the IFC model as well, or is it a SAP database that kind of connects with it and talks to it?
Yes, really, it's a separate thing, right? So some people look at models and, hey, let's just stuff more information into the model. We don't look at it that way, right? We look at it very much in terms of, the model exists for a reason and has information in it that it needs, and we provide the ability to connect that model and all the objects within that model to various other pieces of data. And so if you're in the construction phase, you care a lot about submittals and transmittals and receipt of materials and those sorts of things. When you get into operations, you really don't care about some of those things anymore. You care much more about, when was the last time I had this thing serviced? When's the next time it needs to be serviced? And so instead of trying to stuff all of that data into the model, we allow for a dynamic connection to multiple different data sources that exist within other systems in most organizations today.
So the model is more like a window to the other data.
The model is a window to the other data. That's a really great way of putting it. Yep.
Yeah. I should patent that. That's good. I really appreciate your time. We could probably keep. I don't know if we got any more questions, but let me just double check here before we move on. I really appreciate your time. It was a really good presentation. We are going to hear more from Johnny this afternoon. He's presenting with the executive series, so kind of a more strategic presentation there. This one was designed to be a little bit more technical, and I really appreciate all the flow charts. I mean, obviously not enough time to go through those things in detail, but I appreciate that you included them, and all those presentation materials will be available to the audience so they can download them and study them. And I assume that Johnny's going to give his cell phone out to everybody who has any questions so that they can harass him with questions.
Sure. On. And my cell phone number is actually on my LinkedIn profile, so feel free.